With that introduction, I didn't think it was going to be me. You know, I have to correct Joe slightly here. He said the themes for this month were relative reality, individual perception, and illusion. Now, I don't know if you got the same list I did. My list from Sandy included those, but it had a fourth one called Quantum Physics for Bob. So I don't know if, I'm assuming all of the speakers will be talking about quantum physics for Bob. So I'll be fascinated to hear what that is. But last month I spoke about quantum physics a lot. And this month I want to vary that a little bit. I'm going to be talking about science in a slightly different way, trying to emphasize what I think is really the theme, with the theme being reality isn't anything like what we experience. It's totally different, and what does that mean to us? And before, I've talked about the idea that one of the main purposes of our five senses is to fool us. Our five senses are designed to show us a reality that isn't there. We're going to talk about that. But what is the reality that is there? Well, one of the simplest things, again, we've mentioned many times, is that nothing is solid. So this is not even remotely solid. Neither am I or anything around us. Remember, we're all made out of atoms. If you took an atom, the simplest atom, and you blew up its proton in the middle, its nucleus, to the size of, say, a golf ball, and it had an electron circling it, that electron would be something like 10 stories away. That's how much of an atom is matter, a golf ball and a piece of dust, and how much is empty nothingness, everything else in there. So 99% of this and 99% of me and all of us is empty space. And yet our reality doesn't tell us that. Our senses says it's all solid. Let's look at space and time. I mean, we all see it as very fixed. We might move around, but the space we move in doesn't move. Time is always the same. It may seem slower when you're listening to a talk or something, who knows, but our thoughts is that time is always the same, and yet Einstein proved, it's been tested many times, that that's not true at all. If you're standing on a beach and a friend of yours is in an airplane 7 miles high, that much further from the gravity of the Earth, time will go remotely or minutely faster for them. If we send an atomic clock up in the highest kinds of planes that can fly and have one on the ground and they're both showing the same time and we bring them back together, they'll show different times. Time is not steady. Nor is space. If I could take Joe here and put him in a spaceship that went, say, 3/4 of the speed of light, which we can't do, and I could see him flying by, and I held up a yardstick that's 3 feet long, and he held up a yardstick, I would see his yardstick as shrunk to about half. But he wouldn't. He would see it as 3 feet long. And he would see mine as shrunk to about half. Because space is not a solid entity. It's fluid for each of us. This is the ultimate true reality. Just like we're all one. We know that. We say it all of the time. What does it mean? We don't experience it that way. But I think a good illustration is the quaking aspen tree. The aspen tree is one of Gene's favorite trees, loves to go up in the mountains. You know, if there's even a minor breeze going through, makes the leaves make this beautiful sound. Aspen trees can grow from seeds, and like one might, but most don't. So if you go to Utah and there's the Pando Grove there, 100 acres. If you took all of that, you would see 100 acres of trees. But the reality is, if you could see under the ground, it started with one tree that grew out roots, and each of those trees is a sprout out of that roof, out of those roots. And they're all clones. They're all exactly the same. So this grove weighs about 14 million pounds. It's 80,000 years old. And yet the reality is, if you could see it, is it's all one organism. It's a tree root system with sprouts that we see as separate trees. And that's how our reality is. We see things that's separate, but if we could see the underlying truth, it's all one. Now, why is the world like that? Why don't we just see it all as one? And of course, we know that for whatever reason, we're in this physical existence, and if we saw everything as one, we would be dead fairly soon. I mean, if you saw a lion that was there and said, I'm one with that lion, so I'm going to go up and hug it, well, you would become one with the lion, probably. But maybe not in the sense that you meant. So in the physical world of survival, we have to see things the way our senses show us. But if that's true, why isn't reality just made that way? I mean, it could be where everything is separate, where things are actually solid, where time doesn't change. Why did this divine intelligence design a reality that isn't like what we see? To address that, I'm going to have to talk about an even stranger aspect of physics. If you took a beam of light and you shine it, let's just call it a film here, a piece of film, so you can see, that light would hit that and you would just see a glob of light there, right? If you took that light and you put it through what's called a beam splitter, and what that does is it allows half of the light to go one way and half of the light to go to the other. And if you do that, and the two distances back to the film aren't exactly the same, you'll get what's called an interference pattern. Because remember, if two waves come together, if they come together and both of them are going up, then they'll be even higher. But if one's going up and one's going down, they disappear. This is water waves, air waves, whatever. It's also waves of light. So when these two beams come together, some of them show bright, some of them show nothing. It's called an interference pattern. The key to that is we know they went on both routes. Okay? Now we're going to change this experiment, and now instead of a beam of light, we're going to shoot one photon of light. That's like one electron. So you have electricity as energy, and electron is matter. We're going to shoot one photon of light. Is it going to split and go both ways? It's just one object. But if you do that, it will split and go both ways, and you'll see an interference pattern. But that's simple. The thing that makes it strange is that if you put a device on there to measure which way, did it go to the right or did it go to the left? Now remember, it goes and it hits this splitter. So it has a choice. It can go either right or left, or it can go both. If you don't measure which way it goes, it always goes both. It always creates an interference pattern. So here it comes, it hits the splitter. If we have something that measures which side it goes on, it will only go on one side. Even though we're measuring it after it should have already chosen to split. How does the electron know we have that measurement device there? In fact, we can turn the device on after it's already split. And if we don't turn it on, it will split and show an interference pattern. And if we do, it won't. Now, this is done by the best scientist in the world. This isn't some quirk. It's hard to explain, but for us, here's the explanation. Here's what it tells us. Our decisions affect the very foundation of reality. Because if we choose to use a system that will measure waves, we will have waves. If we choose to use a system that measures particles, we will have particles. Nothing else affects that except our choice of how we measure it. So what that tells us is that our problem is not, if you will, that we live in this cold, indifferent universe and how are we going to exist? But our problem is, how do we take the role that we are meant to take, which is to affect the reality that creates our lives? And an illustration of that to me is, I've been doing this consulting work over the last a few months. The last 2